Palestinians in Gaza are enduring what may be the cruelest phase of this cruel conflict. For nearly 80 days, Israel blocked the entry of life-saving international aid. As the world's leading hunger assessment found, the entire population of Gaza is facing the risk of famine. Families are being starved and denied the very basics, all with the world watching in real time.
That is to flood the zone with assistance. And it's not just the food assistance, right? You need to be getting in shelter.
I don't think we can underplay or overscore the severity of the situation at this moment. Having covered the war and the humanitarian situation in Gaza now since the inception of this phase of the conflict, I don't think we've ever found ourselves in a more acute moment in terms of conditions on the ground. We have been close to famine in the past, but all the indicators, particularly from the IPC, the international sort of mechanism that evaluates the state of food insecurity inside of Gaza, says the warning lights are all blinking bright red right now. So we're at a moment where the combination of the extended sort of trauma that people have had to live through, combined with the blockade for the last couple of months on the population and the lack of assistance getting in, has led to probably the most acute humanitarian situation that we've seen. Couple that with the fact that a massive Israeli offensive is now, if reports are to be believed, underway. Together, this creates an environment in which it's going to be extremely difficult to respond to the humanitarian needs, which are now probably greater than they've ever been.
All the aid authorized until now amounts to a teaspoon of aid when a flood of assistance is required. The needs are massive and the obstacles are staggering.
It's a product of the level of desperation that people are feeling, right? They can't even wait for it to get to a distribution site.
So seeing a couple, dozens, if maybe 100 trucks make their way in over the last couple of days, it's just the very tip of what is required, right? We need 400, 500, 600 trucks moving a day. And not only do they need to be getting into Gaza, you need to be able to distribute them inside. So we saw over the last 24 hours at least one case where a World Food Program truck or convoy was looted. That looting is a subject of the level of, it's a product of the level of desperation that people are feeling, right? They can't even wait for it to get to a distribution site. That's how bad assistance is needed on the inside. We know that the way you deal with that is to flood the zone with assistance. And it's not just the food assistance, right? You need to be getting in shelter, you need to be getting in medical supplies, you need to be getting very specialized treatment for children who are malnourished. And we know there are thousands of children who are acutely malnourished. The danger here is a famine response operation is a large and complex thing, much more complex than traditional humanitarian assistance. If we are at that point where we're tipping into it, trying to launch that operation in the midst or in the face of a massive Israeli offensive, coupled with what we hear and see are restrictions on what humanitarian aid will be let in and how it's going to be let in. Probably aware that there's this new plan for a Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which in essence will involve the militarization and securitization of assistance going in and locate it in a couple of highly securitized distribution points. Building that system in the middle of a war while you're trying to also stand up a famine response operation is going to be next to impossible to see how that gets done.
Israel, as the occupying power, has a duty to facilitate and provide for the civilian population. All warring parties amid hostilities cannot block aid. Starvation as a weapon of war is a war crime. To deliberately deprive the civilian population of food, of medicine, of objects indispensable for their survival amounts to an act of genocide. The International Court of Justice has already ordered the Israeli government to facilitate the provision of aid. It issued binding orders in the genocide case brought by South Africa. The International Criminal Court has indicted Prime Minister Netanyahu and his former defense minister for war crimes and crimes against humanity, including those related to the Israeli government's starvation strategy. The Israeli government is bound to provide for the provision of the civilian population, to allow food, to allow aid in. Failure to do so amounts to war crimes and acts of genocide. Israel's new military offensive, Gideon's Chariot, amounts to an abhorrent escalation in the Israeli government's crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, and acts of genocide against the Palestinian people. The Israeli government is bound by the laws of war to discriminate between civilians and combatants, to not engage in disproportionate, indiscriminate attacks. Yet the Israeli government has repeatedly carried out unlawfully indiscriminate attacks. They have reduced much of Gaza's homes, schools, and hospitals to rubble. It has carried out attacks that have killed tens of thousands of Palestinians. The new plan would destroy, according to Israeli officials, what remains of Gaza's civilian infrastructure.
מתן אהוב שלי, אני מאמינה בכל ליבי שאתה שומע אותי. דע שאמא נלחמת עליך, יום ולילה.
שמחה וגאווה לאומית לצד ההבנה שכבר הרבה זמן אין שמחה שהיא שלמה. מים רבים לא יכבו את האהבה ונערות לא ישטפוה. שר יובל רפאל בשיר שסחף את כל אירופה. ויש...
תמונות סטיילס, תסתכלו קדימה שנייה.
Netanyahu would prefer an eternal political war over the return of citizens abducted on his watch. He prefers flattening Gaza at the cost of creating another 58 souls who will be missing in actions.
Netanyahu is dragging us deeper into disaster. Please, Mr. President, place the Trump deal for ending the war and returning the hostages on the table. Only you can force Netanyahu to sign a deal to end the war and bring our kids home. The war in Gaza must end now by signing a deal for the release and return of all hostages. We can and will deal with all other threats once they are safely returned home. The hostages must come first.
ומאז אני כבר לא אותה אופיר. אני כל כך רוצה להתעורר למציאות אחרת, טובה יותר. אני לא אפסיק להיאבק על המציאות הזו, לכולנו.
נשאר אוויר כנוע,